Right now, as you watch this, invisible digital weapons are being aimed at the heart of American commerce. The Port of Los Angeles isn't just moving cargo, it's fighting a war you can't see. Drop a comment below telling us, are we prepared for the next wave? And hit subscribe, because what's coming next will shock you. The Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly beyond the San Pedro Bay, where massive container ships queue like chess pieces waiting their turn. Each vessel carries billions in goods, electronics from Asia, automotive parts, clothing, pharmaceuticals that keep hospital shelves stocked. This port handles over 9 million container units annually, making it the busiest in the Western Hemisphere. When these docks go silent, American store shelves empty within weeks. Hospital supplies dwindle. Factory assembly lines halt. The entire supply chain collapses like dominoes, and in 2024, Chinese state-sponsored hackers nearly made that nightmare real. The attack didn't announce itself with explosions or visible destruction. Instead, it crept through fiber optic cables, slithering into terminal operating systems that coordinate the intricate ballet of cranes, trucks, and trains. These systems manage everything, from tracking which container goes where, to scheduling the massive ship-to-shore cranes that can lift loads weighing hundreds of tons. Federal investigators discovered the intrusion in March 2024, hidden deep within the port's operational technology networks. The hackers had established what cybersecurity experts call persistent access, meaning they could return at will, ready to flip switches that would paralyze operations. Space Force's role in this confrontation surprises most people who still think of the military's newest branch as focused solely on satellites and rockets. But modern warfare has evolved beyond traditional boundaries. The United States Space Force operates extensive cyber operations because today's conflicts happen across domains. Space, cyber, air, land, and sea all interconnect. When Chinese operatives infiltrated port systems, they simultaneously targeted GPS signals and communication satellites that coordinate global shipping. Space Force cyber teams detected anomalies in satellite data streams, noticing subtle interference patterns that suggested coordinated attacks on both ground infrastructure and orbital assets. The hackers belonged to Volt Typhoon, a Chinese state-sponsored group that US intelligence agencies have tracked for years. Unlike typical cybercriminals seeking financial gain, Volt Typhoon focuses on critical infrastructure, power grids, water treatment facilities, transportation networks, and ports. Their strategy involves pre-positioning within systems, creating backdoors they can exploit during future conflicts. Imagine burglars who break into your home, not to steal immediately, but to hide keys throughout the house for later use. That's exactly what happened at Los Angeles. They mapped every system, identified vulnerabilities, and planted tools that could trigger chaos on command. The Port of Los Angeles processes 40% of all containerized imports entering the United States. Shutting it down would immediately impact major retailers like Walmart and Target, whose shelves depend on steady cargo flows. Automotive manufacturers, relying on just-in-time delivery of parts, would face production shutdowns within days. Agricultural exporters shipping California produce to Asia would lose billions as perishable goods rotted on docks. The economic damage would cascade across the entire nation, potentially costing hundreds of billions of dollars and triggering recession-level unemployment. This wasn't just an attack on infrastructure, it was economic. Warfare designed to cripple American prosperity without firing a single conventional weapon. Federal agencies responded with unprecedented coordination once the breach was discovered. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency mobilized rapid response teams who descended on port facilities with forensic equipment. Space Force cyber operators worked alongside FBI agents and private sector cybersecurity firms, conducting what one official described as digital archaeology. They had to carefully excavate layers of code without alerting the hackers that their presence was detected. This delicate operation took months, as investigators traced command and control, servers back through multiple countries, routing through compromised systems in Europe and Southeast Asia before, ultimately connecting to infrastructure in mainland China. The technical sophistication involved was staggering. Volt Typhoon operatives exploited zero-day vulnerabilities, previously unknown security flaws that even software manufacturers hadn't discovered. They used legitimate administrative credentials stolen through phishing attacks on port employees, making their network traffic appear normal to security systems. Once inside, they deployed custom malware, specifically designed for industrial control systems that manage port cranes and automated guided vehicles. This malware could theoretically command cranes to stop mid-operation, scramble container tracking databases, or disable safety systems that prevent collisions between massive equipment. Space Force's involvement extended beyond Earth-bound networks. Modern ports rely heavily on GPS timing signals for synchronizing operations and tracking cargo movements. Chinese cyber units attempted to interfere with these signals through spoofing techniques, broadcasting false GPS data that could confuse navigation systems. Space Force's Space Delta 6, responsible for cyber operations, detected these interference attempts through anomaly detection algorithms monitoring satellite signal integrity. They worked with commercial satellite operators to implement authentication protocols that verify signal legitimacy, creating a defensive shield around the orbital infrastructure supporting port operations. The geopolitical implications reach far beyond California's coastline. China views control over global supply chains as strategic leverage in its competition with the United States. By demonstrating the ability to disrupt American ports, Beijing sends a message about its cyber capabilities while maintaining plausible deniability. Chinese officials deny involvement, claiming the accusations are politically motivated. But intelligence assessments, including those from allied nations like Australia and the United Kingdom, confirm the attribution. This creates a complex diplomatic situation where traditional rules of engagement don't apply. How do you respond to an attack that never officially happened? Port authorities implemented extensive security upgrades following the incident. They segmented networks, separating operational technology from business systems to contain potential breaches. Multi-factor authentication became mandatory for all administrative access. Continuous monitoring systems now analyze network traffic patterns using artificial intelligence to detect subtle anomalies that human analysts might miss. These improvements cost hundreds of millions of dollars, but the alternative, successful paralysis of America's busiest port, would cost exponentially more. Other major ports, including Long Beach, New York, and Savannah, initiated similar security reviews, recognizing that what happened in Los Angeles could happen anywhere. The role of Space Force in defending critical infrastructure represents a paradigm shift in how America approaches national security. Traditional military branches focus on physical domains: Army on land, Navy at sea, Air Force in the sky. But Space Force operates in both the orbital realm and cyberspace, recognizing these domains as inseparable in modern conflict. Every GPS satellite, every communication relay, every weather monitoring system in orbit represents both a capability and a vulnerability. Chinese anti-satellite weapons and cyber tools could potentially knock out these systems, blinding military forces and disrupting civilian infrastructure simultaneously. Space Force trains operators to think across these interconnected battle spaces, defending against threats that don't respect traditional boundaries. Congressional testimony following the Los Angeles incident revealed disturbing gaps in critical infrastructure protection. Much of America's port infrastructure remains privately owned, creating coordination challenges between government security agencies and commercial operators. Companies resist expensive security upgrades that don't generate immediate profits, even when national security demands them. Lawmakers proposed legislation requiring minimum cybersecurity standards for critical infrastructure, with federal subsidies to offset implementation costs. These debates continue as industry groups lobby against regulations they view as burdensome, while security experts warn that voluntary measures prove insufficient against nation-state adversaries. The human element in these cyber conflicts often gets overlooked amid technical discussions about malware and network architecture. Port workers, longshoremen operating cranes, clerks managing manifests, truck drivers hauling containers, all became unwitting participants in this digital confrontation. Their daily routines depend on systems that invisible adversaries tried to weaponize. Training programs now teach employees to recognize phishing attempts and social engineering tactics. Security culture changed from viewing cybersecurity as an IT department problem to understanding it as everyone's responsibility. This cultural shift, while necessary, takes years to fully implement across workforces that traditionally focused on physical operations rather than digital threats. International maritime shipping represents a particularly vulnerable sector because it crosses so many jurisdictions and involves countless interconnected systems. A container traveling from Shanghai to Los Angeles touches systems owned by Chinese exporters. International shipping lines, port authorities in multiple countries, customs agencies, trucking companies, and American retailers. Each handoff creates potential vulnerability points. Securing this global network requires unprecedented international cooperation, which proves challenging when nation-states view cyber operations as legitimate tools of statecraft. The Los Angeles attack highlighted these systemic vulnerabilities, forcing uncomfortable conversations about how to secure supply chains that span adversarial borders. Space Force continues expanding its cyber mission as threats evolve. They recruit not just traditional military personnel, but also civilian hackers, software engineers, and data scientists who understand the digital battlefield. Training programs simulate sophisticated attacks on critical infrastructure, preparing defenders for scenarios like the Los Angeles incident. These cyber warriors operate from bases that look more like tech startups than traditional military installations. Open floor plans, collaborative workspaces, and walls covered with monitors displaying network traffic visualizations. The enemy they fight is equally unconventional, adversaries who work from office buildings in Beijing or Moscow, launching attacks that travel at light speed through submarine cables and satellite links. The economic dimensions of cyber warfare often exceed traditional military conflicts in terms of potential damage. A successful attack on multiple major ports simultaneously could trigger supply shortages that panic consumers and destabilize markets. Stock values would plummet. Currency exchanges would fluctuate wildly. International trade relationships would strain as countries blame each other for disruptions. This economic chaos serves Chinese strategic interests by weakening American power, without the risks and costs of conventional military confrontation. Understanding this strategy helps explain why Beijing invests so heavily in cyber capabilities targeting infrastructure rather than just military assets.